Here we go. I'm starting the recording now. So, hi, my name is Gerald Rhodes, and I am the author of my book that's now available on Amazon, My Morning Practice. And I'm here with Joy. Joy, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Gerald. I certainly will. My name is Joy Langley, and I'm from the I'm from the UK. So I say I'm from the USA. I'm from the UK, and I'm a coach, threat therapist, and I specialize in areas around stress. So I can encompass depression, anxiety, things that make us feel bad. But I'm a general practitioner in that respect, so it's everything. But I do like to specialize in that because I think it's the cornerstone of our problems.
Gotcha. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, so today's call is we're gonna just keep this loose. We're gonna keep the format kind of informal here today. But one of the things I wanted to talk about are some of the issues that are facing us nowadays as we try and move forward with our lives. We try and focus on something that we want in our lives, to even begin to decide on what we want in our lives.
Well, that's a huge topic, Gerald. You got to start somewhere. But it sounds as though, for me, you sort of like leave the safety of your childhood and your teen years, where you have lots of routines, don't you? You go to school. You're meant to go to school, let's say,
Sure.
and you're moving on to work. And as you move, obviously, from being that teenage person with, I suppose, decisions are made from you, you're learning how to make your own decisions. So I'm sure for all of us that's been a strange pathway. I know for me it was strange looking after myself and looking out for myself and not having my parents, I suppose, just there as not as the backup, because they're always there as a backup, but to tell me what to do. So no one tells us how to be grown up, Gerald. We somehow just get shoved into it and we begin making decisions, which can be around work, can also be around where we live, relationships, you name it. Lots of decisions which are nothing to do with school.
Sure, but aren't a lot of those decisions that we make a direct influence of our parents, our teachers, our environment? Wouldn't you say?
Well, I think it's more to do with, it feels like a bit of brainwashing,
Hmm.
Gerald, to be quite honest, because if I were brought up to think, well, I'm going to, sail the seven seas or climb Mount Everest or live in outer space, if I'd been told that that was what I was going to do when I apparently got to a certain age, I'm sure I wouldn't question it. I would just do it. So it's this idea about really us all being shoved into this way of thinking. You sort of like work, you get married perhaps, or you have children, and then you have a home and, 2.5 kids or whatever it's meant to be, in a car, and then you retire, and then you die. It's kind of this sequence of events that we not quite promised, but certainly it's presented as the path we're going to take, Gerald.
Exactly.
That's the path that we're going to take.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly how I see it, as a sequence of events. So you start here, you do A, B, C, and D, exactly like you're describing. So there's really not much thought into what you're doing. You're just follow along. I know for me, one of my path, one of the things that was instilled with me is I grew up in an area where all I saw were everybody was doctors, lawyers, executives. So that's naturally what I expected that I would aspire to. And then once I got into college, of course, I was expected to go to college. That wasn't even a question. And once I got to college, I really wanted to be an economist, because again, that was what I was, told I was, supposed to want and do and be. And I got into college and I found I wasn't really very good at that. I wasn't very skilled at that. I didn't have those it just wasn't something that I was truly passionate about.
Which
So
must have been a big disappointment, well, a big upsetting disappointment for you, but
Yes.
perhaps even more so for the people around you. I don't know. I'm not
Yes.
quite sure who's the most disappointed, Gerald, sometimes about the direction that we want to take. Is it us because our dreams have been shattered, or is it other people because of the expectations that they have of us? I'm not sure. I know that my own disappointment when I finished at 22, did my degree, and the aspiration was, oh, you'll get a job, not clearly knowing what I wanted, but thinking, oh, well, once you get a degree, of course, the world just opens up to you. And it wasn't. And
No.
my disappointment lasted probably 3 or 4 years. It turned
Oh.
into depression, be quite honest, Gerald.
Hmm.
But is
Yes.
that I'm not, as you said, be, do, have, if everyone's got it, then why haven't I?
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And we just assume that, these are the things that we want. And as we start to step along the way, we realize that, hey, maybe this isn't what I want. And I think that's also one of the most challenging things around us, is to really stop and think about what we actually want. Not what our parents want us to be, not what our friends are telling us to be. And, if we're so lucky to have, children, what our children want us to be, but what do we want?
That's a really tough place, isn't it, Gerald? It's almost like you should go to another school or a university just to work out what you're meant to be, because I don't know many people that stop and take the time to um, live in that bubble. It's a bit like a no man's land, isn't it?
Hmm.
And I think that in-betweeny place between what I thought I should be and then the stepping stone to where you perhaps are going to go, it can be a dark place.
Yeah.
For people. Um, I admire the people who write off the word go, know what they want to do in life. They want to
Sure.
be, you said, you thought you wanted to be an economist, and it could have worked out really well for you. It could have been
Hmm.
exactly what you wanted to do, or you want to be an actor and you're suddenly doing it, or
Hmm.
you want to go and, save the whales, and you're saving the whales out there in the ocean and the dolphins and anything else you can think of. But
Hmm.
I personally never knew what I wanted to do. So I don't know if that was bad or good, but it didn't help to set me off. If I was on my little bike with my trainer wheels on the back, it certainly didn't help me to have the right push off
No.
into life. Like this thing about if I want to get to America or get to Canada, or I want to get to, the UK, and I haven't got a map or I don't know anything in terms of directions, I'm really not going to get there. So my state of like flux, where am I meant to be, and possibly looking to you for the answer, Gerald. Where am I meant to be? Or the person behind the counter in McDonald's. Where am I meant to be? Or anyone I can stop who will give me some answers. It's like within the absence of me knowing where I want to be. Funnily enough, life puts you somewhere, doesn't it?
It
You will
certainly
land
does.
somewhere.
It certainly does. I mean, because the truth is, and the point is that we are right here. We are in this moment right now, and everything that we've done has led us to this moment right now. All of our thoughts, all of our dreams, all of the shoulda, woulda, couldas. They all bring us right here, and it's really our job. Uh, as human beings to really, uh, I want to say, put some meaning around that for ourselves, and really be able to pick and choose that meaning.
Yes, that is the crux, isn't it? So I don't know. You tell me, Gerald, your story of how did you find your pathway back to perhaps believing in yourself again, or at least feeling really sure about the next step in your life? Because I know that mine wasn't a straight line.
No, mine wasn't a straight line, and it didn't take just a couple of years either. It took decades. For me,
Wow.
and just like you were saying, for some people, they always know what they want to do, or some people they find it in a couple of years. But for me, it took me a very, very long time. I struggled with trying one thing. I've had maybe, half a dozen different careers in my adult life, everything from, personal training, to being a chef, to selling software. I mean, I've had all these sorts of, different careers in my life, and I've gotten a tremendous amount of value out of each one of them. But there was always something that was missing from them. There was always something that I really wasn't, connecting with myself in doing each one of these things. But
I mean, I'm going to give you credit for having had so many jobs in that, because I see that as being skilled.
Those aren't just
I see it as an
jobs.
upside.
Those are just, whole careers. I had several jobs in there. Yeah.
But my dad's from an older generation, and if he heard you saying that, and he said it to me many a time, you're like jack of all trades and master of none. Mm-hmm. So of course our folks have all these proverbs which they throw at us, which make us feel like crap. My dad, used to throw that one at me a lot when I was doing different things. And I said, Dad, what do you want me to do? And I think he's come from a generation where he actually had a job most of his life, the same kind of like area of work, manual laboring, mind you, but the same job. And you stayed in your job. It was like a job for life type of thing. Sure. Nowadays, with young people, the dilemma that they're facing is probably 10 times worse than what you or me have had. Mm-hmm. We think we've had a lot of jobs, yeah? Wow, we roll up those poor millennials. They're going to have a lot of jobs because the marketplace is changing so quickly. But going back to this thing about finding your way, Gerald, because I'm really interested in your book. It's a great title, and I'm wondering more about the content, because I've not had a chance to have a look through your book yet. But the title grabbed me. The fact you've got a book, I mean, that's just amazing in itself.
Thank you. Well, yeah, the book is titled My Morning Practice: How to Put Down the Bottle, How to Escape Mediocrity and Master Your Morning Mindset. So for me, as I was going along and I was doing all these different careers and I was doing all these different jobs, one thing that I noticed was that I love teaching, I love mentoring, but most importantly, I loved connecting with people. And I found that I could make deep connections with people. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But one of the things I was finding was that I just had this sense of hopelessness, that my life was never going to change, that nothing would possibly make my life change.
When I hear you say that, it makes my heart sink, Gerald, because I know there's a lot of pain behind that, not just for you, but also for other people in a similar position who might be listening to us as well. And the bigger question has to be that what do you do? Because I know how dark that particular place can be. A testament that you can survive it is that me and you are here talking about it.
Yes.
Talking about is it not the night of the... Is it the night of the dark soul, that kind of a statement? I'm kind of trying to remember what the statement is. But basically, we go through this place where things are not great. And it's like a trial or like a journey, the hero's journey. Another big thing, isn't it? The hero has all these obstacles put in the way that they're going to overcome, and they come out the other side. But in between, it's like a good movie. A good bad movie. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think makes us so hesitant to share our stories too is that it sounds so familiar, and it's really not that much, of a different story than anyone else's. Just like I said, I went from job to job, career to career. And, just like you said, I found myself in this really dark place where I didn't feel like anything could possibly change. I was sitting there on the couch with a bottle of bourbon and the TV remote in the other hand, watching the series finale of my favorite show and just waiting for my career to do something for me and my family. And guess what? My career never did anything.
Well, the waiting is not what it's all about, isn't it? Eventually, we learn that I suppose that the onus is on us. It's the responsibility lies with us. But It's such a dilemma, like a chicken and egg, isn't it? It's
Mm-hmm.
not that we're lazy. It's not that we don't want to do things. It's not that we're, really going to get our teeth into something and make it work. We just don't know what it is.
Yes.
So it's almost you can't get started because you don't
Yes.
know what it is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with trying lots of different things. So it's not about waiting for that perfect moment or that perfect job. I would encourage people to just do the job. Do it to the best of your ability. Then if at some point it doesn't feel as though it's working out, work out what you can maneuver into or what you want to maneuver to. And I always say to my clients that come to see me that, when you were born, you weren't born and someone stamped on your bottom, oh, this person is going to work for McDonald's. Oh, this person is going to be, Prime Minister. Ooh, this person is going to work for, over here, British Telecom, or is it what's your telecommunications company? A&T?
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
So it's not like we came out of the womb and we had this stamp put on us, which told us what we were going to be, and we were tied to that for life. Some people might say, I wish I knew what I want to do. I wish someone had stamped that on my bottom and said, yeah, that's what I'm going to be. But we got free will. We have a brain, it evolves and it changes. And I think what human beings need to cope with, and what I've learned to cope with, is just change. Change feels uncomfortable. And familiarity obviously feels very safe.
Mm-hmm.
And human beings are veering towards safety. It's what we have a comfort zone. We have our place of feeling good. And when that place is threatened, obviously this fight and flight thing kicks in, our innate desire to defend ourselves, protect ourselves. But we're not running away from animals anymore. We're running away from bad jobs, and we're running away from bad relationships. And, so the things that are scaring us are not really life-threatening. Unfortunately, me and you, we're living in economies where we're not worried about, our houses being bombed by somebody,
Oh,
or
no.
someone coming and just taking what we have and claiming it as their own, or possibly even wiping our lives out and our families. So, I'm
No, not
grateful
at
for
all.
that. I'm
Yes.
grateful for that. But the feelings of fear that are created are the same. So when I talk about anxiety, I talk about stress and depression, it's like, the feelings are the same. You feel bad saying, well, I shouldn't be so ungrateful. Who am I to sit here complaining when somebody else in another country is worse off than me? I'm saying
Sure.
that you're justified in feeling bad. Don't dismiss it,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it, and
Mm-hmm.
use that sometimes to work out, what am I going to do next? Because I know that point when you hit it, if it's like the rock bottom, there are only two ways to go. I was thinking, Gerald, there's only one way to go, which is up. But actually, there is another way to go, which was down. I
Yes,
don't know
there
where
is.
you've been exactly, don't know where you've been in your life, but down. And I'm sure people know what I mean. The exit door, that's kind of one place. But I'm hoping that once you hit the rock bottom, it motivates you to say, do you know what? That's it. I'm going to go out there and try again. And then you pick yourself up and you find the information that you need, speak to the people that you need, and your energy and your enthusiasm and your desire for life comes back. That's
Exactly.
that's kind of the happy ending. But I think most people have a happy ending. I've seen some bad ones, but people have happy endings.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And just like you said, the testament is that we are here right now. So, we did survive. So, that's the first step. But going back to your question about, my story and how I moved forward, for me, I had these feelings that nothing was ever going to change, and I didn't know what first step to take, and I knew that I had to get out of my living situation. I had to do something for me and my family. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that something had to change. But I didn't realize until I changed that everything else would change.
Okay, so what was the catalyst then? Because the thing is that me and you, where we're a little bit older,
Mm-hmm.
and there might be people that are listening that are younger, that are in a similar position to us, feeling possibly at the places that me and you have been to, and waiting for that magic formula, or that elixir of life, something to tell them. Magical compass, like all the good
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood stories. Where's this magical thing that we're going to find that's going to like suddenly just change the whole direction of our lives? So I don't know. I mean, for me, Gerald, that place was realizing that even though I felt down and depressed and perhaps I didn't want to be here, that wasn't really what I wanted. And then getting into like self-help books, I suppose,
Mhm.
realizing that there was such a thing as self-help books. You know, that's a big revelation when you go to a bookshop and you see this department or these shelves that you've never looked at before, and they're just full of books. You think, right. You start dipping into them and you try one and it's not bad, and you go back for another. It becomes quite addictive, doesn't it? So
Yes, it
for
does.
me, that whole thing about the self-help industry was where I found, if for want of a word, Gerald, found my salvation, i.e. it stopped me from going down the spiral that I was in. And from that point on, it was just little snippets of information around positive thinking, positive psychology, I suppose, affirmations, ideas about your strengths and your weaknesses, ideas about, how to be a persuasive person, how to make friends and how to win friends and influence people. So all these top books that are
Mhm.
out there, and then top, I suppose, mentors and speakers like Anthony Robbins in
Mhm.
his early days and stuff. He's still there. He's hung in there, and new people coming through. So for me, that was, and it still is in a way, Gerald, my go-to place, my salvation. When I feel that, as I call it, I have all these little cups in my head, like my love cup, my spiritual cup, my health cup, which I kind of
Ah,
ignore, which I'm paying the price for at the moment. But when I feel like my spiritual cup is getting low, I just dip into any of my favorite books and have a read of them. And that's enough to make me feel better or point me in the right direction or calm me down. So it still works for me. So that was my secret plate. That was what got me out of that funk, for want of a word, Gerald. I don't know what yours was.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's so important, is that idea of reading, and I think that people really discount that, especially in the age of of television and Netflix and all these things that frankly are designed to numb ourselves from our lives and separate ourselves from ourselves, and then being able to connect to yourself through a book, through a self-help book, through something that's uplifting and something that really makes you feel good. I think that's such a unfortunately such a rarity. But all the successful people, they all know the secret. They all have libraries. They all read books. They all get ideas from a book and they turn it into, a success or money or, a new relationship or, whatever they want. And
And it's quite strange, Gerald, isn't it? In this day and age of technology and, everyone's connected to their mobile phones. And if
Mhm.
they're reading, books from Kindles or whatever it is, everyone's tapped into something, or you're right, just consuming stuff from the television. Everyone's sort of like lost, well, not everyone, but people perhaps need to be reminded, especially young people coming through, about the difference between being a passive consumer and
Mhm.
then an active, for want of a word, creator.
Yes.
The word creator
Yes.
is an interesting word because we're talking about as you said, whether there's some kind of conspiracy theory around making us all consumers, but yeah, we're all consumers because we have to, people want us to buy their products. Okay, so I get the consumer part of it, but the mindlessness behind it, literally, I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm sat in front of this television for 3 hours and I'm eating lots of chips or drinking my alcohol or me having lots of chocolates. I'm not really thinking about it, and then it's bedtime and then I go to bed and I wake up and I do the same thing again.
Yes.
So for me, that monotonous routine just struck me as being so pointless. I said to myself, if that's what the meaning of life is, then perhaps I don't want to be here. It
Mhm.
just didn't have any kind of substance to it. So once I found my route of like, oh, there's more to me than that, and started doing some of the exercises in these books, because they force you to take part in your own life. And
Absolutely.
there's this big thing about this whole, like within the whole the new age world, of waking up. And it sounds really strange to say, wake up, Joy, wake up, Gerald. It's like, yeah, I'm awake. What's the problem? Actually, you're not awake if you're just consuming. You can't be awake because you're operating on automatic, and the brain loves to operate on automatic. It reduces everything down to automatic things, which is why we end up following patterns, doing the same things in the same way over and over again, because the brain doesn't like to find new routes, because it takes a little bit more energy and a little bit more, let's say, habit to find that new route. So you're stuck.
Comfort zone.
Oh.
Yes.
It can be comfortable.
Yeah, it is comfortable. Yeah. It's what you know. So it's what you know. So it's comfortable. Absolutely.
And there's a bigger thing, Gerald, that you don't know what you don't know. Oh. That's another conundrum. All these conundrums get thrown at you once you start entering that world of, personal development and self-help. You think it's just it feels like you're in a maze, and you have to just find your way around it. And every time you think you've got there, someone moves it, and you think, oh, goodness me, where is it? And then you get into like going on all this, the seminars and the looking at webinars at the moment on obviously laptops. But before that, people hopefully still go out to physical places and network with people and be in groups and attend those. So they're big things, where they do give you the most amazing buzz, being around people that feel exactly like you, and do exactly what they think like you. So you're in a room. It's a bit like going to a religious ceremony.
Yeah, it is kind of.
You may be religious, or a spiritual thing where everybody's on the same page. Now that's a great feeling. And within the New Age field, they will acknowledge that sense of belongingness that happens when we all share the same idea, or perhaps all repeat the same lines, or if you're religious, prayers, but there is power in words.
Yes.
There's power in thoughts initially, isn't it?
Yes.
Stuck in your head. And then you get smarter and you put it down on paper. Then there's power in words. And then the ultimate power is carrying it out. So action. So from the thought to the word, then to the action. So those were some of the ideas which I kept on stumbling across, and ignoring them sometimes because they just didn't click at the time. Might be a third time round that clicked. I might have read it the couple of years before that, Gerald. Seriously,
yeah.
Oh no, right over my head.
I'm laughing because I know.
Especially that one I just said about you don't know what you don't know. I'm like, oh my God, that's so freaky. What do you mean I don't know what I don't know? That's scary.
And I think just to break it down for people, we all know what we know. So like I know how to ride a bike. Okay. I know how to ski. I know those things. Okay. And then I know the things that I don't know. I know I don't know how to do brain surgery. Okay. I know I don't know how to architect a building. Okay. I know I don't know those things. Okay. But then there's that whole other world of the things you don't know that you don't know. And they are literally in your blind spot. So you can't possibly know them without some sort of outside help. So that means that you have to get outside of your head. You have to stop. You have to not think the same thoughts that you just keep thinking over and over and over again. You got to get outside of your comfort zone. You have to take on maybe a new habit, or you may have to do something like reading that will open yourself up to these blind spots that you have, so that you don't keep repeating those same actions over and over and over again that keep on giving you the same results.
Exactly. And I'm going to go back a couple of sentences for you, Gerald, when you said that you do know what you don't know, that you can't, did you say design a building or
sure. Yeah.
architecture or something? But I'm also going to pull you up on that, because actually you don't know whether you can do that either.
I don't know whether I can,
unless you've tried it. Unless you've tried it.
Yes.
This is the ultimate kind of point where you get to in your self-development, where you're just open, literally that word, open-minded. We all think we're open-minded, don't we, until we get told something or someone's opinion doesn't quite match ours. Then we find that we're not open-minded. But trying to be open minded, literally allow things to come into your field of vision or your way of working. Have no major opinion on whether you can do it or you can't do it. You
Hmm.
don't actually know whether you can do it or you can't do it until you've tried it.
Let me give you a great example. When all through high school, I got C's in English. Okay. All throughout high school, I had the same high school teacher every single year, all 4 years of high school. I had the same high school English teacher, and he gave me C's every single trimester. Okay. And I don't have a degree in English. Okay. Never taken a writing course, never done anything like that. Yet I have published a book. I have self-published a book.
Good on you.
I learned I learned all the steps I need to take in order to do that. And
Brilliant.
I
Brilliant.
really had to have the presence to make it a priority for me, to make it something that a goal for myself. I had to stop and think, and what are some of the things that I want for my life? And it, turned out that a book was one of them, a way for me to be able to share my story. Simply, that was all that it is a way for me to be able to share my story. But I had to stop and think and then take action on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because until you take the action, then it remains a dream, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, it just remains a very good idea in your head that one day that you will do one day. So there's this whole thing as well, Gerald, around that, I'm no different to you, to the next person or to the other person. But what might set me and you apart from them is that we take action. So it might sound really simple, putting one foot in front of the other and just plodding along, doing, taking everything on board bit by bit. Because when you start to approach anything, it just feels really overwhelming. So overwhelm is a big thing, isn't it? It's it just happens. For me, when it happens to me, it's like being almost like I feel like being drowned in water.
Yes.
It's that
Yes.
rush of like something that just seems to envelop you. For me, it happens in my brain. It happens in my brain. I actually kind of think I stop and stand still, and I think my breathing stops sometimes. I think I just catch myself thinking, oh, I've forgotten to breathe. After like 15, I think 50, I think, oh, I've forgotten to breathe. But that to me is, I recognize that now because of what I do as a job, that my fear button's been triggered. I've actually now had a rush of adrenaline, and I'm acting on some very basic impulses to do with saving my life, apparently. But all I've happened to have is overwhelm because my desk is untidy again, and I've got a whole lot of pile of papers to put away, which I attempt to do, and I just end up shoveling them from one place to another. And at some point, I say to my head, "Oh my God, this is just too much for me." Whoosh, overwhelm, pile of papers, but it triggers your fear response. And I think you have to just recognize sometimes how you get into anxiety.
Yes.
And sometimes how you can get out of it.
Yes.
I recognize how I get into it.
Well, that's
I got some techniques to get out of it.
That's literally the first step, is having that awareness of what is happening to you. Because, just like we keep talking about, you something triggers you, and then automatically you have a reaction to that, and then automatically you have an action to that. So,
and the automatic nature of that also, Gerald, is where, as you said, you mentioned about the patterns and the habits that we have. We are literally doing the same things over and over again. And as you say, we're very surprised when we get the same results. We're thinking, but you haven't tried anything differently, Joy. You're going through your same routine. You've got your pile of papers. You started shuffling them around and you were quite happy. And then you got overwhelmed, and then you put them all back together and you put them in the corner again. And then you did the same thing the next day and the day after that. How about approaching it in a different way? Or perhaps you need someone else to look through it for you, Joe. I mean, there's lots of, how
asking
about
for help?
Asking for help. Hey, Gerald, men don't ask for help, do they? Neither do some women. I'm one of those. I'm quite difficult, when it comes to like asking for help, because I've always viewed it as a sign of weakness. And I think men might do as well, but for different reasons, through socializations, should I say, not socializing, socialization of boys and also girls. We're encouraged to be, a bit asky and a bit needy and a bit whatever. And you're totally discouraged.
Yes.
Quite the opposite.
Exactly. Exactly. And here's a little known secret is that nobody does it alone. No one does it alone. Everybody has help. If you look at some of the most successful people out there, they all had help. You look at a great athlete. You look at somebody like Michael Jordan. He had a coach that took him from when he couldn't make the high school basketball team because he didn't have the skills, the drive to be on the high school basketball team, to having those sorts of coaches and mentors that helped him be great. And if he didn't have those coaches and mentors, he would have just been another kid who never played basketball. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and you're quite right about this help thing. It's not as needy as it sounds,
no.
because I think if you bring into it the idea that from the moment you were born, you've had help, and we'll call it coaches. Let's say we'll call it mentors.
Yes, let's call it coaches.
Hopefully, you've had good mentors in the form of your parents or your caregivers, and then you've had good coaches or mentors in the form of your teachers. And then you may even have had good mentors or coaches in the form of friends.
Mm-hmm.
So, that idea of being supported by people is something which I encourage. I encourage people to have a network. When you're on one of your downers, a depression or whatever it might be, and you really are pushing people away, you need other people around you to say, hang on, Joy,
yes,
this isn't good. This isn't good, Joy. Isolation, I will tell my clients, isolation is probably one of the biggest signs that you're entering a depression. You don't realize it. You just don't want people to be, you don't want to be around people.
You don't want to bother people.
You don't want to bother them, and you don't want to be around them either. People invite you out, say, oh no, not today, and you just find yourself isolated,
Mm-hmm.
and you're stuck with your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You're stuck with your thoughts.
Just keeps
Gerald, we are really putting the world to rights today, aren't we? Oh, wow. And you still haven't told me about the content of your book. It's such a great title. You have to let everyone know what they're going to find inside of it.
Yeah. So one of the things that for me that broke that loop of never thinking that anything was going to be able to change in my life was that I got arrested for a DUI. I was arrested for drunk driving, and on that night. That was the last night that I was drinking. I had gotten kicked out of the house, gotten kicked out of my in-laws' house. I ended up losing my job. I felt like I had lost everything. My entire world was turned upside down. And one of the most interesting things that happened to me next was, but before that, I was doing a little bit of self-help. I went to a couple of seminars, and I had this idea that I wanted to start a business. I had no idea what it was going to be, no idea what I was going to do, but I decided I was going to start a blog. So I had started this kind of Dear Diary type of blog, talked about my cycling and doing all those sorts of things. So that was something that was really passionate to me, and something that I really really enjoyed. But I got arrested for my DUI, and it was the best thing to happen for me. Okay,
Ironic, isn't it?
Best thing to happen for me. So
ironic that something so bad
yes.
you can actually reframe it, as they say, or reconstruct it into like the turning point in your life, forcing you to create a new chapter, or forcing you to go down another road.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I could have kept on doing the same thing and wondering why I kept getting the same results. But I had to have this, a sledgehammer of a life experience hit me in order for me to do something different. So the next day after I got arrested, next day I got kicked out of the house and everything. The next day I had my first call with my first coach. So my coach, she helped me start my blog, and she turned it into this idea of a Dear Diary sort of thing to a business where I was helping people. So it was exactly what you were talking about a few moments ago too. It's this idea of just being a consumer to being a producer,
Yes.
creating something.
Yes.
And that's a huge difference. That's a huge leap in the technology, you know, that we use to navigate this life of ours, is to go from that idea of being a consumer or solely a consumer to being a producer.
And I'm going to say that the one thing about, becoming a producer or a creator, Gerald, is that there is, for me, a strong belief that everybody has a gift or a talent or something they're meant to bring into the world and
Absolutely.
share it with somebody else. Okay. So while we are passively being consumers, it's like taking that gift and throwing it out in the yard, or burying it in the deep blue sea, or putting it in a space rocket and sending it into outer space, because you're never going to know and nobody else is going to benefit from it. And what you did was really hard. You turned yourself around into someone who you became a giver.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole act of giving, funnily enough, is powerful in itself. People don't realize that. Human beings are kind of attuned to giving. There's almost something inside of us that makes us feel really great when we give and when we help people, which then encourages us to do even more. So we're not even aware of that process. We just know that when we help people, we hold the door open for someone. Oh, I feel good. Oh, yeah. Help someone who stopped by the side, change a tire. Oh, I feel really good about that. You don't know why you feel good. Mm-hmm. You just feel good. But it encourages you to do more. So this thing about looking out for your fellow man or fellow woman, yeah, we are built to do that.
We are.
So, hearing you create something which then went on to become a business for you and actually helped and supported people is amazing. And going back to the Dear Diary part, if I was looking at it from a therapeutic perspective, there's this whole idea about allowing, your feelings to come out, this posh word catharsis, but there's this shift in the way that you feel or way that you are if you're able to write your feelings down or record them in some way. Writing is a very powerful form of creation. So whether you're just writing about your life and nobody read it, not just you personally, Gerald, if I'd done something and I just, I wanted to be forgiven for something, there is value in me sitting down and writing, Dear Gerald, I am so sorry that I broke your beautiful skis that I can see in the background. Because you're wondering, you've been looking at those skis, you've been thinking, who broke my skis? You wait till I get my hands on them. And I'm feeling guilty for days, days, if not weeks. And eventually, if I'm a decent human being, I will be consumed by some guilt. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you. But in between, if I want to get to that point as well, I could say, Dear Diary, I did something bad today. I broke Gerald's skis and I haven't told him. You don't know how much this has been eating me up. I've been having such poor sleep. I've not been eating probably. And I kind of know I need to do the right thing, which is tell him. But he won't be happy. But if I tell him, at least I'll stop being unhappy. So perhaps, there's a whole dialogue. I could just go on forever writing a long book about that process of me revealing more of me, being honest with myself, and then doing something.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. I mentioned the part about writing things down, because that was one of the first principles, habits that I began to develop after my DUI. So like I had mentioned, I was, starting to do some blog writing, but, we had talked about reading earlier before. And one of the things that I had, gotten was this idea of writing down 10 ideas. There's this character named James Altucher. He's a blog writer. He has his own podcast. He talks about, his extreme highs, making millions of dollars, and then his extreme lows where he's lost everything, lost all his money, lost all of his lost, his family, went, ran the gamut. But one of the things he had talked about was the idea of writing down 10 ideas. So one of the things I did shortly after my DUI was I began to get up a little bit earlier and simply write down these 10 ideas. And it did two things for me. One, it got me in the habit of writing down ideas. It got me in that habit of using that muscle of coming up with ideas. The second thing that it did was I soon began to think of myself as a person who comes up with ideas. And that has served me so well for so many different times where, I felt like, my go-to is, I don't know. That's my go-to phrase. I don't know. I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what the next step is to do. And then if I start just writing down a couple of ideas, sure, a lot of them are going to be, complete bunk. They're not going to have any value whatsoever. But there might be one or two of them that may lead to something that can help me to take a different action.
Of course. And the main thing about the writing and the persisting at writing is that you're right. Eventually you'll come up with something that feels good. So when it comes to writing, just because we've come through a system which might have told us that we're not good at maths, or we're not good at English, or we're not good at science, I'm like, do you know what? That was back then, okay? And that was for a certain period of your life, probably 16 years, okay? Now you're 3 times that age or 2 times that age. Don't you think you could probably get yourself another type of education? So get yourself an education. I call all the training that I do, whether it's through Google, or it's through I would say Google is God and people want to shoot me, but you know what, it's irreverent, but it's it has the answers. God has all the answers and Google pretends to, and then we got YouTube. But I find a lot of information through other people who are like you, freely sharing their information. Some of it's really great, some of it you have to take with a pinch of salt, but become a discerning person. But you are quite right when you say write things down, and don't be afraid to write. So if anyone's listening, do not be afraid to write, do not be afraid to journal. You might really, really enjoy journaling. You might not realize how much you enjoy it. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed speaking, for one, Gerald, which is really strange thing to say, but I'm speaking to you. And a bit like you, I really believed I didn't have anything to say. And I'm a real firm believer in the fact, in the notion of, until I have something sensible to say, then don't say anything.
Sure.
I mean, it just makes so much sense to me. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
The reason why I'm on the line with you right now, Gerald, is because I'm in that space where I don't feel that's not true anymore.
No.
I actually do have something to say, which is kind of shocking for me. Like, wow, Joy, you have things to say. It's almost like there's this person who remembers the joy of old, and then the person who's looking at the joy that's new, and they're saying, but they're not the same person. I'm saying, yeah, you're right. They're not the same person.
They're not. You
have to grow. You have to allow yourself to grow. So personal development, personal growth, whatever you want to call it, it's the idea that you will continue growing, if you're lucky, till the day that you die.
Yes.
The idea of learning something new every day. When I do come across something new that I've learned, from somebody, even you, Joe, when I spoke to you the last time, you taught me something, and I will say to them, oh my God, I didn't know that. Now I do.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that, you can open a door in a completely different way. I'd never looked at it that way.
And it's all because I shared something with you. It's all because I decided to open my mouth. And even though, just like you're saying, I didn't feel like I had anything worthwhile to share, that I did share something.
Absolutely. And that's why I really have this even stronger sense that every human being has this extraordinary idea to share. And it's just them. And the reason why I know they have it is because everyone's unique and everyone's an individual.
Yes.
And the thing that stops you possibly from sharing your story about yourself can just be your own feelings of self-esteem and self-worth. And
Hmm.
we all know how fragile that can be. I don't feel like a valuable human being, therefore I'm not going to say anything. Who am I to tell Gerald about my life, how horrible it was growing up when I was, 16 and my mum was depressed, and then going on to university and coming out and being depressed. And it's like, that's not very interesting, is it? How do I know it's not interesting? How do I know? It's my life. I get it. I've been inside. I've been that player up on the stage, that leading actress on the stage, and I get it. I do it all the time. It's me. But somebody else has not watched that film.
No. And just by sharing that, who knows who else would hear that and may help that other person, just knowing that they are not alone, that they're not the only one feeling this way. And just because you stood up and said something, now somebody else doesn't feel quite so alone. Now maybe somebody else can take a different action.
Absolutely.
They can do something different. And that is so powerful. And that's what's so powerful about each one of our individual stories. Exactly like you're saying, we all have this gift inside of us to be able to, that it's our obligation to give it to people. It's our obligation to share it with people. And all that is required is that you be yourself.
Be yourself. And that means being around people perhaps who will help you to elevate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's an idea about, we are, what's it, the sum total of, I don't know what the number is, could be 4 or 6
Five
people that we
people.
surround ourselves. The numbers
Sure.
are always changing. But,
Sure.
of course you are the sum total of the people that you surround yourself with, because they're either going to drag you down to the lowest common denominator, whoever that person might be in the group, or if you're in a group where people are slightly higher than you, you will be elevated to the area, to the level that somebody's at. That's why it sounds a bit, sounds a bit elitist, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Surround yourself with good people. But yes, surround yourself with
Yeah.
good people, because you will aspire to do better. Just like a child watching an adult and thinking, oh, is that how you do it? Oh, is that how you do it? Children are watching all the time, and they're
Mm-hmm.
always aspiring to do what they see. So that's probably just based on the simple principle of, if you're around people that are doing things, you will, as a part of us, perhaps it naturally copies, but do that. There is so much out there. And I think with your story, your book, you told us the first half of the title, the next half was about habits, but you can tell me more. But I'm so full of admiration for you coming out and admitting something which I suppose you might feel deeply ashamed about. Getting that driving under the influence thing, because you might want to never tell anyone about it, and you could have just descended into nothingness and hide, basically.
Sure. Yeah.
Hide, you know.
Yeah.
But someone hearing how you have recovered from something which apparently was bad is going to be inspiring.
Exactly. Exactly. And it was exactly that. It was taking the necessary steps that I felt that I need to take in order to change my life. Yeah, I lost some friends along the way. There's some people I'm just not as close with anymore. But then, I started associating myself with a whole other group of friends. And, we all have this same drive. We all have this, same goal. All the friends that I hang around with, we're all writing books, I mean, that's the culture of the company that I keep, is that's what we're up to in this world. So, and this idea of having this morning practice where you're able to focus on the things that are most important to you, and taking that time to do things like read, to take the time to do things like journal, to pray, meditate. For me, one of my huge cornerstone habits is exercise. So every single morning I get up and I go for a bike ride. And I do that every single day, whether or not it's snowing outside or raining outside, or it's usually pretty cold in the morning, so there's no really getting around that. But no matter what, I go for a bike ride.
And
And
that requires a lot of discipline, Gerald. I don't think I'm as disciplined as that. I kind of know what I ought to do, but I'm not as disciplined with that as that. And some of the morning routines that you've just described, absolutely, I've read it 1,000 times. I started practicing the journaling, and I still have a book that I journal in, but it's not as regularly as it used to be. But I kept the habit of journals going quite a bit of my life. So I can go back probably 10 years with
Wow.
journals that I've started writing
Wow.
and stopped perhaps for 4 months and then started up again. And then, you know, because I really do benefit from writing my thoughts down, and I don't necessarily read them back again
Yeah.
in that moment. It can sometimes be a couple of years later where I'll read what I wrote, 3 years ago, and I think, oh my goodness me, was I thinking that? Look how far I've come. Oh my goodness me, I've still got that same thought.
See?
Wow, so that
Full
must be something which I need to
perspective.
do or I want to do, or so that was the power of me
Hmm.
writing. But the power of writing is great. You don't even have to write in neat handwriting
No,
because you don't have to read it back.
no.
There's a whole thing about just a stream of consciousness, as they call it. You sit down and you just write. Even if you write 10 times, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know. Well, I wish I knew what to write. Well, actually, I do know what to write. I want to write about, this is, and you just keep writing and you
Yes.
fill a whole page. If you get really good at it, you might fill 2 pages,
Yep.
and that's it. So
Yeah.
that's habit. And
It,
that
it
and
is.
that habit has really helped me with my writing, I think.
Absolutely. And for me, that habit started with getting up an extra 5 minutes early in the morning. It started really small. Okay. It didn't start with this, whole 2 hour, morning routine that, some people are known to do. It started with getting up 5 minutes early and writing
Yeah.
down 10 ideas.
And if people cannot uh, if you're listening and you cannot give yourself 5 more minutes of your own time to benefit yourself or to
Mhm.
invest in yourself, then
Mhm.
I don't know what's going to happen, really, because you have to want it to happen. And 5 minutes is not a lot. We
Yep.
spend 5 minutes wasting time doing nonsensical things, spend that 5 minutes wisely. And like you said, you build up to it. So your book is about the cultivation of habits.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
the idea that you don't have to start big, you can start small.
One
Right.
habit at a time,
Oh,
developing
fabulous.
one skill at a time.
That's a good book. I think you have to plug the name again, to be quite honest, Gerald, just to remind me even.
My book is called My Morning Practice: How to Put Down the Bottle, Escape Mediocrity, and Master Your Morning Mindset.
Right, and that's by Gerald Rhodes, Rhodes. Yes, that sounds like a good book. And, just applauding you for doing that, because that's an amazing feat. A lot of people talk about writing books. Not many people do.
Sure.
So there's the talkers and then there's the doers. So you are in the category, you've already, as I said, elevated yourself amongst above the people who say they will but never
Mhm.
do. You have done it. So, congrats to you. But I have to get going,
Yes,
Gerald.
absolutely. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed our conversation here, Joy.
I think we'll
Absolutely.
have some more,
Yes.
and perhaps one day we'll stick to the script. You've got some questions here, which we had.
I did have a list of questions,
You
and
had a great list of questions.
we talked about some of them, which is great. But I
You
mean, that
think
was
so? You
yeah.
think
I
so?
think it is great that we had this free flowing conversation, and we went from one topic to the next, and I think it really is able to be impactful to people and just really give them the beginning of a roadmap that they
I
can
hope so. I
so.
hope it gives them the beginning of a roadmap, Gerald, and I hope it gives them some inspiration. And, perhaps when I come back, we'll talk again, but we might be a bit more specific about something, because the one thing that I found when I was going through all those self-development books was it always seemed that people left me like hanging at the end of something. It's like, they always say like it's like when you're following roadmaps, or if people don't even use roadmaps anymore. They got their sat nav on, haven't they? But when we used to be following roadmaps, or if you're looking at road signs, we used to have proper road signs, and suddenly the sign that's saying, "Oh, you're going to this place," and then suddenly it would just disappear. You think, "Where's the next one? Or where's the next one?"
Yeah.
So I found that a little bit with my personal development, that the instructions on how to get somewhere seemed to be a bit vague towards the end, and just like stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, where's the rest of it? So perhaps me and you should not do that to other people. That's torture. Perhaps we might be doing that without realizing it, Gerald. So we go back to, one of them and pick on it properly and perhaps follow it through from A to Z so that we can say that, yeah, we've done that roadmap, that blueprint. We've tried to pad it out as best as we can.
Perfect.
Because yeah.
Then we'll do that next time. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Gerald, so much for
Thank you, Joy.
having me on your show, or having me interviewing me, because I really I'm going to be big-headed, for want of a word, and I don't call it being big-headed. I call it understanding my gifts and my talents. I really do have something to say.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing, Joy. All right, Joy.